Crawford. Michelle?
Thank you, Julia. Okay, so unfortunately we have a little bit of a lot of bad news. We're going to take a moment of silence for Avis Ransom, who was an integral part of BRJA. She was our family member. Unfortunately, she did pass away night before last, and we would be remiss if we did not take a moment to remember her and her greatness and all the work she did and how integral she was to all the work we do at BRJA. These are events that, you know, she helped to mentor me on when I first came into this space. And these are events that she normally would be very much a part of. So we don't want to not acknowledge her passing. So at this time, we're going to take a moment of silence. Also, if you all would just know that we at this time as an organization don't have a lot of answers. But we did not want to, again, not remember her before moving on. So at this moment, we'll take a moment of silence. Okay, I think maybe we should take a few deep breaths before we move on to our discussion. Okay, so before we start our discussion, Anthony, if you wouldn't mind putting the first slide up. We're going to do a little bit of background information about why this discussion, a lot of discussions around defunding the police have been about, should we defund the police? Should we try reform? That's not what we're going to do tonight. Tonight, we're having this space of kind of, for the sake of the conversation for tonight, that we are going to be defunding the police, that we are going to be dismantling the unjust and racist police system. And then from that space, dreaming, imagining, and talking about what else we can have in place of what we currently have. So while not everybody may not be in agreement with that politically, for the sake of the argument tonight, that is what we will be, that will kind of be our starting point. Anthony, can you hear me? Sorry guys, I'm just waiting for our first slide.
Feel. Hey, I seen that movie. And a movie about that.
Everyone could be muted so we don't have a lot of background noise, please.
That movie about that God.
Okay, so once again, like I said, we're going to be starting this conversation from a place of not reform, but why we want to do defunding and not reform.
Can you see this, Michelle?
Yeah, I can see it. Thank you, Anthony. So one of the main reasons why proponents of this funding and dismantling the police force is that when we talk about reforms, a lot of times the reforms that are put into place are not actually upheld, right? So for instance, when we talk about things like the chokehold, we have had instances where we've had people killed within police custody by use of the chokehold. People march, people fight against that, and then the chokeholds are still being used by police officers. In fact, we had a police officer just 2 days ago in Pennsylvania who was doing a similar chokehold with the knee on the neck and head of a Black male in front of a hospital, similar to George Floyd, even though that has been banned in Pennsylvania, right? So time and time again, we see situations where, you know, the public comes out, they have outcries about certain things like chokeholds, about police wearing body cameras, and then those things that are supposed to be not happening are continuing to happen. So this is one of the main reasons why people feel that reform does not work. Next slide, Anthony. So the next reason why reform does not work is because we have to talk about the fact that the police force actually does what it was designed to do. People like to say that the system is broken, that that the justice system is broken, that the police system is broken, when it actually is doing what it was designed to do. The police force that we currently have roots in the slave patrols here in this country, and the roots of our police force come from the police being organized initially in order to protect the interests and the property of wealthy white men. So that means that people who are Black and brown, people who are indigenous, people who are handicapped, people who are queer, people who are women, anyone who does not, people who are not wealthy, anyone who does not fall in this category, the police system is not here designed to protect you. The police force has been designed to protect the interest and the property of wealthy white men. I have a quote from Alex Vitale from the End of Policing that says, "The police force is a state tool that facilitates and allows regimes of exploitation to move forward." And what that means, when we talk about things like the war on drugs, for instance, the war on drugs was actually used by our government to dismantle, infiltrate, and jail Black and brown members of the Black and brown community in this country. It was not actually used, for the most part, to eliminate drug use in this country, as we can see that it's still rampantly a problem, right? But what has happened due to the war on drugs is that the numbers of Black and brown people who are in prison has gone up exponentially. Okay, Anthony, next slide, please. And then the third point is that over the last 40 years or so, the police force has been asked to do things that even they feel should not be within their realm and their scope of their duties, right? Like if you ask most police officers, they don't feel that they should be doing many of the things that they're asked to do in society, right? So as we have these growing social ills like homelessness, drug addiction, domestic violence, police officers are left to deal with these things, even though they're not trained, they're not equipped, they're showing up to these situations with guns when they're not necessary, and they're just not equipped to deal with these things. We could be doing have other measures as a society to deal with these issues. And so that is the background information for why I'm saying in this space, we are starting from a place of reform does not work, and now we must move to defunding. So at this point, we're going to move to our panel. I'm so thankful that our panel is here with us tonight. We have Ani from Safe Streets, Tawanda from West Wednesdays Coalition, Aja Taylor from Bread for the City. And at this time, I'm going to let them introduce themselves to you all. So for the panel, if you could please introduce yourself, your organization, give us a little bit of information about your organization, the work that you do within that organization, and how you came to that work. And we'll go ahead and start with Ani.
Hello, everyone. Everyone in BRJA knows me as Ani, but in Safe Streets, Baltimore, I'm Anisha Thomas. I'm the Deputy Director of Safe Streets, Baltimore, which is a data-driven, evidence-based violence prevention program based currently in the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. I came to the work by divine intervention. I was working in the administrative department of the health department when Safe Streets was still there. And I got to meet the director at that time. Well, she's still the director, Dedra Lane. Helped her on a few projects, and then she asked me if I would be interested in working for the program, and I said yes. So that's the story.
Thank you, Ani. And at this time, Tawanda, if you would like to introduce yourself and your organization and the work that you do within it.
Hi, can you guys see me? Because I was having technical issues and I had to hop off. Can you guys see me?
No, we can hear you, but it's just your picture. But we can hear you though.
Okay, all right. Anyway, my name is Tawanda Jones, and how I got started was basically when my brother Tyrone West was brutally executed on July the 18th, 2013, and this Saturday will actually be 7 years since his brutally untimely death. And we felt compelled as a family fighting for accountability to, you know, put a space together that not only can we fight as, you know, just for our loved one, but for everyone to be able to use this platform and to fight for their loved ones as well, because we know that they're not isolated incidents, it's systemically happening. So that's why West Wednesday was born.
Thank you, Tawanda.
Thank you.
And at this time, we'll have Aja from Bread for the City. If you could introduce yourself and your organization and the work that you do within it.
Sure. Hi, I am Aja Taylor, and I am the Advocacy and Organizing Director of Bread for the City, which is a direct services nonprofit in DC, providing food, medical, legal, and social services to DC residents who are living on low incomes. And the impetus even for the creation of my position, the creation of my program, was around realizing, one, that we weren't going to direct service our way out of the crisis of poverty. And then more, more recently, but like since my time there, so it was happening right about the time that I came on, examining what it means to be a direct services organization who seeks to be anti-racist and like what that means. And so the very first time that we called for moving funding away from police and intentionally into housing is the primary thing that we organize around was in 2017. And so feel really excited about the local and national conversations, not just around defunding police, but around really envisioning what safety actually means and how we can make sure that everyone has the resources that they need in order to truly be safe, thrive, and move beyond survival. And so feel really excited to have this conversation tonight.
Thank you, Aja. I like what you had to say about making sure everyone feels safe. I like that. Okay, so the next question I have for the panel is, why do you think, in your personal opinion and from the work that you do, why do you think the national conversation has moved from reform to defunding? I know some people might feel like the shift has happened quickly. I know some people have been working in that space for a long time, so for them it doesn't seem like it's happened quickly. But in your opinion, why do you think that that shift is now happening? And we'll switch it up this time and start with Tawanda.
Okay, so the reason why I know that it has shifted, and to me it didn't happen fast enough, because it should have been happening. Not only that, I feel like it should just be knocked back down and rebuilt. It's just like crazy right now, because as you see, people are getting executed all around the world, right, at a rampant pace. And with the execution of George Floyd and me just leaving, like I just flew back in from where George Floyd was executed. So for me to be meeting up with all these families in a heartbreaking way, I wouldn't wish anyone. It should have been happened. Like at the end of the day, they don't take our lives serious, and enough is enough. It needs to be dismantled, like for real. And I think now that with the pandemic happening and whatnot, what happened was America was actually able to, instead of them being able to like go in the house and turn their TV off or not even watch, you know, being so people are forced to like stay at home shelters in place and whatnot, they were basically kind of forced to watch and see what happened to Breonna Taylor, what happened to Ahmaud, what happened to George Floyd, and that just broke the camel's back. So now it's like enough is enough, enough been enough. So yeah.
Thank you, Tawanda. Aja?
Yeah, so I'll say that, so it's interesting, and maybe this is also part of the question of like how we come to this work. So like, yeah, the very first person who I ever knew to be killed by cops was my aunt, who was killed by the police. And regardless of like their reasons for doing it, like the punishment for what they had said that she had done it was not a capital offense, right? And yet like she was taken from her children, from her nieces and nephews, from all of us. So this question of reform, police departments have been undergoing reform for the better part of the last 20 years. And I think that your first slide really said it all, frankly, that body cameras just means that now we have even more footage of Black and brown people being murdered, but still lack the accountability, still lack the adequate funding to make sure that folks have what they need. I think that the other reason why we have to have this conversation around defund as opposed to reform is that when we look at city budgets and the ways that cities are spending money, in DC, the MPD's budget is $580 million, right? I know BPD's budget is also outrageous. You have some states like Chicago where the police budget is like, 10, 15, 20% of the budget. But you look at these same places and Black kids are not able to get to school safely. Like Black kids are not able to have to be in families that have stable housing. Like people are being evicted. And I really love what Tawanda said about COVID-19, because not only did it force us to shelter in place, it also uncovered all these places where cities and jurisdictions could be spending money. So here we are, it's, even though the pandemic is not over, lots of governments are saying, oh, well, we're moving into phases of reopening that's based wholly in capitalism, right? Not in safety. And we're like, oh, well, we could have more money for people to safely shelter in place and still receive unemployment and still receive healthcare and still have a moratorium on eviction if we weren't spending $500 million on people to execute them. If we were spending the money to make sure that the only affordable housing, like that the affordable housing that Black and brown people have in this area should not be jail. That shouldn't be the place where you're able to get meals. That shouldn't be the place where you're able to have a roof over your head. And so what does it mean that these cities will invest, $50,000, $60,000 a person to lock someone up, but won't do the same to make sure that those folks have safe, stable, healthy housing, won't do the same to make sure that people are living in neighborhoods where they have resources, where they have access to space and access to food, where food apartheid isn't happening, right? And so we have to have this conversation about defunding, because cops don't keep us safe, but also because we need that money for other things, right? We need that money for other things.
Thank you, Aja. I really liked what you had to say about just really driving home like how much money is being spent on something that's actually not keeping us safe when we have the need for resources in so many other areas. Thank you. And Ani?
So I work for Safe Streets Baltimore. All of our staff are Black. And something I've noticed that's different about even their reactions to this recent experience with George Floyd versus every other experience is they keep talking about how everyone who was involved with that situation wasn't just the man who had his knee on the neck. And I think what really changed the country's response, because now Black people have been saying for years and years and years, we are suffering under this surveillance state mitigated by the police and the governments that pay them, right? They've been saying that they are dying at the hands of the police for many, many years. This time though, and the years that they were saying it, we could ignore it as people of color who are not Black. So I'm a person of color who is not Black. It was easy to look away because we, in our minds, I think, always just assumed that police are white, and that was a Black and white issue. But this George Floyd incident, if you ever see the full span of the video, there's an officer who's Asian, who's hearing George Floyd scream for help. The people who called the police on George Floyd were actually Arab American, so they were brown folks as well. It was so difficult to deny our complacency in this system as people of color who are not Black. It was difficult to look at that and not pretend like we haven't seen situations like that in person. We haven't seen people treat Black folks differently than they've treated us, that we haven't experienced us being compared, especially as Asian folks, as model minorities. For the first time, now I know personally, I've been talking about this for years, but my family members and my peers who are of the same ethnicity or ethnic background as me have ignored me or have said that, you know, oh, you're just making a big deal out of nothing, or you're a social justice warrior, and that just doesn't happen that often. This was the first time I think everybody had to reckon with the thing you couldn't ignore, the thing you couldn't see. Like, you couldn't say you didn't see. It was literally like, wow, if you ever want an example of how much we all fit into this system, the system of policing that benefits like Asian store owners and Asian restaurants and Indian store owners and gas station owners, if you ever wanted to see proof that this system is specifically designed to subjugate a certain type of person, here it is. You can't ignore it anymore. And I think that caused, at least in the communities that I represent and I'm from, to finally say, damn, well, here we are. We can't ignore it anymore. The reality is Black folks have been saying this forever, and the inability of other people to believe Black folks and always wanting proof and always wanting a story and always wanting pictures and videos is trash, unfortunately. But now we can't ignore it. It's there. It's literally right in front of our faces. I think that's what changed.
Thank you, Anisha. I gotta make the adjustment now. No, I like that you brought into the conversation about that it's not just a Black and white issue, and how in this country we have other people of color who are not Black, and what does that mean? How does that play out? And once again, these things are by design, right? Like that other people who are Black but also of color historically have been brought here to play a role in our culture, right? So thank you for bringing that up. So at this time, Anthony, if you could put up the picture slide, we're going to go into our journaling portion. And if you all would like to turn off your cameras while we kind of journal and think and process, you're welcome to do that. It's up to you if you would like to turn them off while we journal or not. I'm going to kind of lead you through a prompt. I want to thank Aja real quick for inspiring this activity. I got bits of this from the teach-in that I sat in with her a few weeks ago. So the picture we have here is my personal picture of when I think about when I feel the most safe, when I feel comforted, when I feel loved. This picture kind of exudes that for me. But what I want you all to do is to think about where you feel the most safe. Where do you feel loved? Where do you feel comforted? And I want you to go to that place now. If you want to close your eyes, whatever is most comfortable for you. I want you to think about what that safe place, where you feel the most safe, what that place is for you. And now that you're in that space, I want you to think about, what do you see around you? Maybe that place is in the woods. Maybe that place is your bedroom. Maybe that place is your grandmother's kitchen. Wherever it is, I want you to think about what you see around you when you're in the place where you feel the most safe. And now I want you to think about what you hear. Maybe you hear waves crashing. Maybe you hear the wind. Maybe you hear someone making food. But I want you to think about what sounds you hear when you're in the place where you feel the most safe. What do you smell when you're in this space? Do you smell someone cooking? Do you smell cut grass? Think about what you smell when you're in the place that you feel the most safe. Everyone can mute their, okay, thank you. What do you feel when you're in this place? Maybe you feel sand between your toes. Maybe you feel carpet. What do you feel when you're in the place that you feel the most safe? Now that we're in our safe place, I want us to really sit and think about how it feels to be in our safe place. What feelings are coming up for you? What emotions? What memories? Just really kind of sit in that and feel like what it feels like to be in your safest place. So from where we are now, in our safest place, I want us to kind of keep that with us as we go into our journaling exercise. And I want us to take a few minutes and I want us to think about if money were not an option, if budgets weren't an option, if politics weren't an option, if there were no barriers to us creating our perfect, safest, loving society, whatever that is for you, what things would you want to be a part of that society? What things would you, if you had the power, what things would you implement? And I want us to think about that from our safe place that we've gone to. I want you to just spend a few minutes writing down any thoughts that come to mind. When you're done journaling, if you want to start to turn your cameras back on so we know that you're done journaling, and then we'll go ahead and take a few minutes to do that now. We're going to give maybe one more minute to wrap up our journaling. Okay, we're gonna ask that you transition from your safe place now to back to our discussion. And before we kind of share out from our journaling activity, I want to go back to the panel. And I want to ask the panel, we're going to move into the future and we're going to already assume that one day the current policing model will be abolished. We're going to claim that. And when that happens, I'm asking the panel, what elements would you like to see in the new model? That, you know, once again, if you're able to create a new model and budgets and politicians are not an obstacle, what things from the work that you do would you like to see in the new model? And, you know, I hate to use like a word like new policing. I feel like, you know, when I was in the teaching with the AJA led, like I felt like we kind of talked about how at some point we're probably going to need a new word, right? That we will redo this whole thing so much to the point that we won't even be calling it policing. But we haven't gotten to that new word yet, quite yet. So yes, so to the panel, what elements or what things would you like to see in this new model that we will be creating? And we'll go ahead and start with Aja.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the new word is safety, right? So it becomes a system that actually is focused on the safety of people, that isn't rooted in the protection of property and things, but that really is like, oh, how do we keep one another safe? And so a system that focuses on wellness, a system that focuses on actually fully funding people having committed resources. So everyone having access to housing that is safe, that is healthy, that they can afford. People are able to truly get justice, that justice isn't someone getting arrested, thrown into an inhumane system only to re-enter community, after being treated really inhumanely by that system and like expected to magically just like become different when that doesn't rehabilitate. So it would be something that actually, a system that actually said, oh, like what are the root causes for this? Like what is going on? And actually sought to understand that. So a system that's not rooted in punishment, but that is rooted in justice and accountability. And it doesn't mean it'll always feel good, because accountability most often is uncomfortable, most often does not feel good, but it does allow people to remain in their dignity.
Thank you, I like that. And then we'll go to Anisha.
This is a hypothetical. I'm not allowed to say defund BPD as a city employee. So just putting that out there. However,
We don't want to get you fired.
However, I think Safe Streets is an example of what happens when you let community members take care of themselves, when you empower people by investing in them and training them and addressing their traumas, and only then really having an expectation that they can heal others in their community. Safe Streets really is only tasked with doing one thing, which is reducing shooting homicides in the police posts that we work in. However, a lot of our work also requires being able to help people with housing, being able to help people with mental health, being able to help people with substance use. And we are not equipped to do that. And the way the police are set up is they shouldn't be dealing with that either. But if there were similar models that, again, empowered people in the community, for example, peer recovery advocates, So we have been for the last 3 years trying to get peer recovery advocates as a part of our model. And we had a grant where we hired peer recovery advocates from the communities that we are posted in, which was difficult to do because a lot of folks didn't have the training or the certification. So then we had to amend our grant and do a modification and say, well, we'll just train the people we need. So folks who had experience with substance use, we put through the training, equipped them to be peer recovery advocates, and they did some of the most incredible work that we accomplished in the last few years, because violence and drug use do co-occur, at least in Baltimore City. But again, it was just a grant. When we asked the city to pick it up, the city said, oh, no, we have service providers who do that. And that was the end of that. Now, I'm not saying the service providers don't do that or they don't do it well, but when you have a hub, a community hub where people trust you and are welcome to you, that's where you should put that sort of resource. And the resource is the community member itself. So I feel like any model moving to divest dollars from the police has to be reinvested in helping heal the community, train the community, and empower the community to address all of these other community ails. Otherwise, whatever model you put in place is not going to work.
Thank you, Anisha. I definitely agree with that. And then Tawanda.
Yeah, so basically, to me, like moving forward, I just wish altogether we could actually get rid of this whole entire capitalist system, because when you have that in place, it's called the haves and the have-nots. When things are not fair equally around the board, that's when homicide rates go up, robbery, all types of crimes, everything. And I just feel like that's the first thing, because what happens is that's like, to me, we always doing like to me, phony cleaning. We're using a dirty mop to go over a filthy floor, but we're not cleaning up. We're spreading dirt from one end and to the other. To me, we need to go to the root of the problem. The root of the problem is this capitalist system, and that's what makes racism come in and all types of stuff. So to me, once we abolish this whole damn system, excuse my French, but we knock it down, build it back up, because once you make things fair for everybody, to me, so if you think about it, not being so I'm a school teacher, and I teach pre-kindergarten. So when I'm sitting there with the babies and whatnot, as long as they are fair, and even me being able to work with older kids and things of that nature, I know that with anybody, and me working at a foster home, anybody, any human being just wants to be treated fairly. And when we're at work, you have different things. Like at every job place, there's always some type of drama, because you have this capitalist system, and then you'll have people like kind of trying to suck up to the boss type of thing to get promotions, and they'll sell. It's like a business. You get what I'm saying? It's like you think, okay, you got a few good friends, but it's a business. And once we, to me, get rid of all this, that's when like fairness will come in. Because to me, nowadays, it doesn't matter if you have a degree, if you have nothing, a GED, nothing, you can still get murdered. You get what I'm saying? Because everything is dealing with this capitalist system, dealing with racism. So to me, until we knock all this down and rebuild it, we're going to constantly have this same issue. So that's what it looks like to me. If we knock it down, build it back up where everything, and of course, in a perfect, it's no such thing as a perfect world, but I think if you have things that are being fair, being transparent, I think that's a better world. And that's a world that I would want to live in with my family and friends.
Thank you, Tawanda. I definitely agree with what you had to say about capitalism. When we talk about dismantling systems, and when we talk about, just like Tawanda said, so racism is the reason why we have racism, like Tawanda said, is because of capitalism, right? Like that is a tool of capitalism, is racism. And so just like Tawanda said, that is at the root. So eventually we got to dismantle that too. So at this time, what I would like for us to do is, for those who feel comfortable sharing from their journaling activity, or if you want to feed off something that one of the panelists have shared, I want us to kind of try to have a discussion virtually. And how that's going to look is, if you would like to share, if you could put it in the chat, just put raise hand, and then I will call on people. If you would like to, just like people have already been doing, if you would like to just put a question or a comment and you want to just leave it in the chat, and I'll try to get to that, we can do it that way as well. But if you would like to say something and unmute yourself and be a part of the discussion, if you could just put raise hand in the comments, and I will call on people as I see them in the chat. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah? Okay. All right, here we go. Okay, so Erin Ainsley, hope I said your name correctly. Would you like to share from the journaling activity?
Yes, you said it correctly. Erin Ainsley. So I guess one of the things that sort of building upon Ani from Safe Streets Baltimore, or Safe Streets, is investing in the community. Is investing in the community. I was particularly thinking about funding community skill sharing, like drum circles, pottery demo, stuff like that. And I guess on a more, I guess also to look into more respite-like recovery centers where people can take the time to recoup their mental and emotional energies for their mental health. And also like overdose prevention sites, like, yes.
Thank you, Erin. I think those are all really good points. I think that unfortunately in a capitalist society, we do not talk about rest enough. So thank you for bringing that up. All great points. All right, let me go to the chat. Let's see here. J.K. Schmid from the Afro. Would you like to share?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Awesome. Okay. I guess just in the spirit of what comes next, what will stop, I guess, a police force from being redistributed, I guess, even less equitably than it is now? Like, I'm thinking like private police. I'm thinking like, let's say we pretend or accept for a moment that like Hopkins are the good guys, right? But they have this archipelago of properties that they can barely keep track of, right? And they want to police that themselves. So is that a component of this philosophy or desire, or is this just end at what can be done at City Hall, or how do, like, I'm just worried, or maybe not worried, but a concern would be if the BPD goes away, how do you stop that force from moving somewhere else where you have even less control? And I know that was a really long wind up, so I hope I'm going to stop it right there if that's okay.
So I think that that's a very valid concern. And I have heard people discuss that if we get rid of the police force that we have, that people will just basically hire little private armies and private militias. I think that I'm not sure that anyone really has the answer to that because we're not at that point yet. Obviously, Aja said she would love to talk about that. I'm gonna pass that off to Aja.
Not because I have an answer. I'm like, oh yeah, like this is a critical thing. I mean, to the question, it's an interesting question for me that sometimes, and I don't think that this was your intention, but I'm often like, okay, well, if we're moving there, then we're accepting the premise that like they have to go, which is like, I'm like, great, so we're already on the same page. But I'm like, yeah, so the cities and jurisdictions can legislate things around guns. So you can have private security, but private security is not able to operate outside of the law, right? And when I say not able, I mean not legally allowed to operate outside of the law. And so jurisdictions could, if they felt like what is important to us because this conversation about gun violence also must include the police, right? So if we're talking about disarmament as a strategy, then it follows that like part of the defund conversation has to be disarming the cops, and that is the same for any other security force. So I'm not saying you can't have a security person at the front. I'm not saying you can't have somebody at the front if that's what makes you feel good, or if that's if that person serves a purpose. And I want people to have jobs, but that person doesn't need to have a gun, right? There's no reason that someone has a gun and is outside in the safe way. It's like if I steal some peanuts, like is the punishment murder? So then why do I need someone with a gun ready to execute? And so jurisdictions can regulate that. And right now, those contracts are primarily regulated by police departments. But those contracts can be like transferred to the city, and then like those folks can be disarmed. Like you can create laws that make it illegal for those folks to carry weapons.
Thank you, Aja. Another point that I was going to say to that is that I think that we, because I was listening actually to a podcast this morning about abolishing the prison system. I think that, like, for instance, only 5% of the calls that police go to are actually violent, right? Like most of the things that police deal with, they really should not even be handling, right? And I think that when we talk about defunding and putting those resources into the areas and the calls should actually be going to the right places, we would have a skeleton of a police force, right? Like even if we didn't completely get rid of the police force we have now, even if we could get it to that skeleton place of where it should actually be, we would be in a much better place than we are now, right? So not that issues and things in society won't be handled, but they'll just be handled by the appropriate person. Like for instance, if you have a fire, you're not calling the police, you're calling the fire department, right? So just trying to think of it in those terms. Okay, Nadia, apparently you had your hand raised and I didn't see it. If you would like to go.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay, awesome. Yeah, actually going off of someone earlier's point about like rest, I feel like especially when we have like service workers, service workers, but also like social workers, nurses, like all of our support systems are just like in this model of capitalism, not being paid enough. Like I know so many teachers in particular that work second jobs, that have side hustles. I know so many social workers that are struggling to make ends meet. And it's like, how do we have all this money for police officers, but we do not have money for the people that really need it? Like, why are our social workers struggling to make ends meet? And so I feel like in this world that I see in the future, like we should be paying, I mean, I'm beyond a 5 for 15. I'm like a 5 for 20 at this point, because we need to be paying the people that are healing our communities appropriately so that they can actually afford to rest. Like, I feel like a teacher already is doing so much, but if they have that second job, like they're never resting. And then they can't show up to be their best person when they're at work anyway. So I think that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadia. I definitely agree with that. And I totally agree. I used to be a teacher, and a lot of teachers wait tables and do all kinds of things to make ends meet. So that is definitely true. Thank you for that comment. Next, we have Emma Matthews. If you would like to share.
Hi, guys. Thank you. So I was like following along and you guys were like answering. I feel like we're on the same wavelength, but I really like the exercise for the perfect loving society. So I wanted to read my list, and I think it like goes along with what everybody's been saying. Like universal basic income, universal health care, including mental health and dental, alternatives to 911 instead of police intervention, which was already mentioned. Drug courts is the first option in all jurisdictions. Needle exchange, safe streets, decriminalization, fresh start, exonerate and expunge defendants who have misdemeanor charges and nonviolent drug offenses, affordable housing, unemployment insurance, Social Security, like improve it, disarm the police like in the UK, which we look at this, the UK did this already. There's a model for doing this. You know, their laws are a little different because we have all these different jurisdictions all over the US. It makes it a lot harder to make these changes, but like they did it, you know, so we have a place to look to, you know, and then like having options for intervention for domestic violence victims, because we are the ones who are affected by these changes. When you say defund the police, some of us are, yes, get them the hell out of my life. And some of us are like, no, you know, I almost died. You know what I mean? Like, I need to sometimes be able to call the police. So I want options for intervention, right? Options. Give the people who are being intervened with options and environmental justice, you know. So that was what, like, I got really, felt so super safe there.
Good. Thank you, Emma. I'm glad you enjoyed that activity. I agree with what you had to say. And yes, I think that when people hear defund the police, they think that it's going to be like, oh my God, what's that movie where they have the siren and people can go out and kill people? I can't think of it. Anyways, people think it's going to be craziness, right? Like, that's not what we're saying. There's still going to be structure to society, right? Like, all we're saying is that this current model was not designed to actually serve us or keep us safe. Therefore, this current model, we don't want it anymore, right? And we're trying to think of a new model. Does not mean anarchy, but a new model. So thank you for that, Emma. And I think Colleen, did you guys hear that?
Hi.
Colleen, okay, go ahead.
Hi, sorry. I froze up for a minute. I think that was a hard one to follow because she covered literally everything on my list. But for me, a huge part of my loving society, if I could do anything, would be to deal with guns, addiction in schools. Because if the schools are based on the tax brackets and the taxing, the income from the taxes, they're never going to be equitable because the housing just isn't equitable to begin with. So getting schools on an even keel, so kids start off with the same kind of, you know, get the same start to life. And then I just think that guns cause problems, whether in the hands of police or regular people. And then finally, as a sister of an addict, I just wish there were better sources for help with addiction and easy and affordable. It's really hard to find stuff, and it's really, really expensive, and causes so much havoc, wreaks so much havoc on families and communities.
Yes, thank you, Colleen. All great points. I wanted to circle back to what Emma said real quick about how we already have a model. And I think a lot of times that is true, that we have other countries who have tried other things, including there are societies in Western Europe who extensively don't have prison systems, right? Like, these are not just pie in the sky ideas. There are people today who live in societies where people do not go to prison for life, right? Like, they go to prison, they're reformed, and then they're released. So, you know, we have most countries, police officers actually don't even carry guns, especially in most of Western Europe, right? So I think that we should be looking at other sources in other countries and things that other people are doing outside of the United States model, and realizing that some people have already done some of these things. I want to encourage people, we have about 10 more minutes of discussion time. If you guys want to put raised hand in the comments. I saw some really good comments in there, but it's hard for me to kind of read them and facilitate the discussion. So if anyone else would like to share based on what you've already heard or based on your journaling activity, just put raised hand in the comments, please. Okay, Aaron, you had another comment?
Yes. I just wanted to sort of throw out there that and looking at sort of other models or models of how things may be working, I think of this really interesting short docu-series that I saw about how places like Germany and South Africa, they're sort of remembering their past to try to move forward. And I think that not disregarding or remembering, not just, I think remembering the past of like, and the current state of like capitalism, slavery, all these other things can help people say, hey, you know, let's not forget where we come from so that we can continue moving forward. That was just my little.
Thank you, Erin. That is an important point because we have not always had our current police system, right? Like we have not always lived in this current way, especially when we talk about mass incarceration. This is something that came around 30, 40 years ago, right? So I love that, Erin, that you're talking about. Let's go back and think about go back into our history for answers. I like that. And then Linda Keeley, did you have your hand raised? Did you want to share?
I did, thank you. On that point, it's really interesting. I've been studying the history of police, and though certainly the 80s and the 90s, you know, were the advent of increased mass incarceration, there really hasn't been a single point in time where the integrity of police has been unquestioned. I mean, and somebody made a comment earlier that, you know, for the past 20 years, we've been looking at reform. It's actually been the past 100 years. In the 1930s, there were blue ribbon commissions to look at police corruption, and every single commission at the federal level, you know, basically has the same idea, and we're in the same place. No different. We've made no progress. And the other thing with regard to how do we get rid of police or defund the police when their guns still on the streets, there have been successful evidence-based programs in cities around the country like Oakland, California, and Boston, Massachusetts, where social services, community leaders, and law enforcement are reaching out to gang members and offering them support and services, and shootings have reduced 70% in some of these cities. So it just goes to show you, it's back to my favorite parenting quote, like, you don't make people feel better by making them feel worse, or you don't make people do better by making them feel worse. So I think that's the paradigm shift we need to make.
Thank you so much, Linda. Like, I totally agree with that. I feel like when I have these conversations with people and they're like, but people do X and they do Y, I'm like, that's because they get treated that way, right? But we have schools with bars on the window. Do you know what I mean? Like we're training children to get ready for prison. So when we socialize people this way and then we get certain results, we act surprised, right? And that if we socialize people and treat them as humans, we're going to get the results that we want. So thank you, Linda. And then Harriet, did you want to share?
Yeah, sure. Let me see if I can. Sorry, I don't have the video capability right now. Can you hear me though? Okay. Yeah, just wanted to share the ways in which like drug court gets used by states attorneys associations and by police, and that they make the argument every year when we try to decriminalize various portions of our substance use and possession kinds of criminalization. They make the argument every year is that, well, we have to have a tool to get people help. And so that's the phrase and the argument that gets used to prop up drug courts, to prop up arrest for carrying around sterile drug use supplies, for carrying around small amounts of controlled substances, is that like we need to have a way to get people help. And so when that's part of why I reacted to using drug courts as an example of what we could dream about, like our desired future. I would like to have us like dream a little bit bigger and like really dream about what non-coercive assistance could look like, about what actually just having different support systems without having to have interaction with someone with a gun and handcuffs and the power to use both would look like. I think we can dream beyond those. And we have been, right?
Thank you, Harriet. And, you know, and this is part of decolonizing the way we think, right? Like sometimes we think, oh, let's try this thing. Like for instance, A lot of people are like, let's send social workers out to do these things. And some people are like, social workers sometimes also perpetuate racist acts on Black and brown people. So this is part of the work. It's having these discussions and saying, you know, hey, let's try this thing, and someone saying, maybe not. Do you know what I mean? This is all part of the process, I feel like. Did anyone else want to share before we move back to the panel? Georgia, did you want to share?
Hi, my name is Georgia. This has been a really wonderful conversation, and one thing that I learned about this week that it's bringing up for me is like how the history of emergency medical services came to be, which was just a super quick for people who don't know, which like came out of Pittsburgh, came out of Black organizing in Pittsburgh, where folks in Black communities were, I think in the 30s, were being responded to with cops when they had medical needs. And often the cops were quite racist and people were dying. And so a group of doctors and medical workers in the community formed their own team and started responding to emergency medical calls. And it became one of the most successful efforts in the country. And all, like, basically the reason why we have emergency medical services today is because of that organizing and people filling that need when it didn't exist before. And so I feel like one of the sort of like acts of liberation that we can do to relieve ourselves of the need for, or the perceived need for, police and prisons is like, do it ourselves, make it ourselves, respond to these things within our communities, like stop using them, stop using the police point blank. And that's like things that we take for granted today were made that way. And also just like endless gratitude for like everything we know and love was made by Black people for Black people. So like shout out to that too.
Thank you, Georgia. I just want to add, I agree with Georgia in that like we have to just kind of start thinking outside the box and not using the police. And I want people to also understand that for a lot of Black and brown people, we've already started doing that because we don't feel safe, right? Like we have already not felt like, there have literally been times where I felt very unsafe and I was like, if I call the police, this situation will get worse, right? Like, so as Black and brown people, we already feel like that's not an option for a lot of us. And so others may feel privileged in that they feel like that is a system that they still can use. But I want you guys to be thinking about, for a lot of us, we already feel like that is already not an option for us. Wendy, did you want to share?
Yeah, I was just going to add the remainder of my dream list for resources would have been for transportation, free college, after school, childcare, even elder care, fair jobs for all, including green jobs. But I guess my question would be, if you send like a social worker out for like domestic violence or psychological breakdowns, those situations might actually still be rather dangerous to where you might want a policeman and a social worker, and that actually doubles the cost of sending somebody out. It doesn't get rid of the need for police. So I'm not totally sure how much we can do without having the police. It would just be nice to have an extra person there that was calmer. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. I think that, for instance, only 5%, I think I said this already, only 5% of the calls that police get called on are actually violent, right? So we have so many issues that police get called to where they and their guns are not needed. We're not saying there aren't some times when violent things do happen. We're not saying we live in a perfect society, but what we're saying is literally almost every time you call the police, there is someone else who could be called. So, and then training those people to be able to take care of that. Let's see. Laura Steele, I think, wanted someone to speak on restorative justice. Does anyone on the panel feel comfortable addressing restorative justice practices, or anyone at all? If not, we can skip it. Okay, so I think what we're going to do right now is, if there were other people who had raised hands, unfortunately, we can't get to everyone. I think we had a really great discussion. I'm thankful to you all for bringing yourselves and your energy to the space. But what I wanted us to do is I wanted us to spend the rest of the time going back to the panel. And I want the panel to talk about next steps as that they see that people could be taking. For instance, you know, like, what do you think some next steps people could be taking towards defunding the police, towards moving towards this space that we want to be in when we do not have the current police model? Also for the panel, if you would like to talk about any other things that you have coming up in your organizations, any events you have coming up, if you want to plug your social media or any other ways in which people can plug into the work that you're doing, if you guys could now take the platform to do that now and put anything in the chat that you would like to share. I'll go ahead and start with Aja.
Oh, yikes. Okay, so in terms of some next steps, I know some folks had asked about where they can follow up and like who should you be following. So the number of local organizations working on it are numerous. And so I know that the Movement for Black Lives page is one place that kind of tries to almost like conglomerate local stuff so that if there are local groups who are local tables who are working on it, and I'm sure that y'all are probably already in communication or relationship with organizations like Organizing Black and like Block and folks like that in Baltimore, BYP 100, Black Lives Matter DC in the DC area, Black Swan Academy. Like there are a ton of local organizations who are working on this broader campaign around defund. But then Movement for Black Lives has both a national agenda and highlights local policy agendas. You could go there, it's M like man, the number 4, B like boy, L.org, and sort of check it out. They just put out the Breathe Act, and I encourage folks to go and check that out because it's pretty dope in terms of a step towards abolition and removing power from police in the United States. And they're doing that in partnership with Representative Ayanna Pressley. So there's a lot of movement happening. I'd say pay attention to stuff going on in Seattle and Detroit, where folks are establishing autonomous zones and really actively experimenting with community safety. I'd pay attention to like violence interruption work going on, like Safe Streets, like some of the violence interruption work happening in DC and Chicago. And just, yeah, there's just a host of groups of people and organizations who literally are like, let's experiment with what it means. And organizations who are having really messy times figuring out what it means to be accountable to one another. That's another thing happening in movement spaces right now. And we all get to be in practice, right? Like we get to be like, oh, like what happens when my growing edges bump up against someone else's? Because safety doesn't mean never doing harm, and it doesn't mean never being harmed, right? It means really stepping into what it means to be accountable for harm done, and what it means to, when harm is done to us, think about like whether there are ways to like engage this person. And it doesn't mean you personally have to engage them, right? It just means that the person isn't thrown away. So yeah, I feel like those are all, I mean, continuing to ask these questions is also a big part of it. Just like literally the thing that's really exciting for me is the number of teach-ins happening, the number of conversations happening. This is my 4th conversation today about this. And one would think that makes it tiring, but it's like, no, that is exciting that not only that so many people are talking about it, but that so many of us in so many different fields, teachers are talking about it, social workers are talking about it, nonprofits are talking about it, you know, like at my job, they're like, okay, so what does it mean that we even have security, period? And like, how do we talk about that? And not just how do we talk about it, but what do we do differently, right? So that the actions of our organizations are aligned with our professed values and the ways that we want to live in the world. And really, it's instead of it can feel overwhelming, but to really look at this as an opportunity to be in deep experimentation with one another, and really see that as an opportunity and a real blessing, frankly.
Thank you so much, Aja. I just really agree with so much of what you just said. I think that we have to be patient with the process, right? Because I feel like we're on the cusp of this amazing time to be alive. It's going to be challenging, but yeah, I love that what you said, that like so many different people are having these conversations. So this is just the beginning. Ani, would you like to share?
Can you repeat the question? Sorry. I can't hear you.
Sorry. If there's anything from your organization that you wanted to share that the work that you're doing, that people could get plugged into it, or anything that you wanted to share about next steps moving beyond the current policing system.
So the one thing I'm really bad at is our social media. I'm looking it up right now. So our Instagram is Safe Streets Baltimore. If you are interested in learning more about Safe Streets, I would actually say emailing me or my boss is the best way. I saw a comment in the chat about how we were taken out of the health department where we belonged. That's true. But it has been a little bit more difficult for us to kind of communicate out to the public because our work has become more politicized since we've become a part of the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. So I know we have expanded this year, and a lot of people have a lot of questions about our expansion, about our sites, about what we do. So I would encourage everyone, if you could, Michelle, just post somewhere my email. If you're interested in learning more about Safe Streets, feel free to email me, and I'll have somebody respond to you about more information. But also, we have an active Instagram. I'm saying this only because I want to say so much about the program, but it's so much more easier when people ask like direct questions than me just blurting, oh, we have a bunch of sites and we prevent violence. We are not just people who prevent violence. We have to wear many, many hats. Our staff are really special. They are proof that redemption and forgiveness is possible by the people in their own communities. Most of our staff are formerly incarcerated. Most of them have convictions and charges of murder, of drug dealing. But again, reinvestment in them is so important, because when they came home, like someone mentioned, when people come home, if they don't have any other options, guess what they're going to do? They're going to do what they know. But if you want to know more about what Safe Streets does, we have community events. We do a lot of resources and referrals. We give away care packages, especially during COVID. We've been giving away masks. We've been giving away sanitizer. We've been giving away fresh produce, so we don't just give away canned goods and non-perishable items. We do a lot, and we wear many hats. So if you have any questions about what we do or where we are located, because we have 10 sites and we are in 5 hospitals, just feel free to email me directly.
Thank you so much, Ani. I'm going to put Ani's email in the chat. And Tawanda, did you want to plug anything that you have coming up in your organization, how people can get plugged into the work that you're doing, next steps for folks?
Yeah, so before I go on to how they can contact me, I just want to say, to me, next step should be, as we're having this, to me, it seems like it's a conversation that's led by people like that haven't felt the effect of police brutality in a personal way when they're just pushing the fact of defunding. And I get all that, but every society makes everything about money. It's not about the income, it's about the outcome. So I feel as though our real focus should be on reopening all these cases of murder where these officers got off, they didn't get investigated or nothing. They need to do that immediately, right? Because if we stop this and they see that they're held accountable, as you and I, if we go out here and murder somebody, we don't get we don't have the Officer Bill of Rights to stop us from talking and we get interviewed and start interrogating. We don't have all that. So they need to knock that down, get that out the way, and hold these officers accountable. While we're having this conversation right now, they need to reopen every last case and charge these killer cops accordingly. Because if they keep getting away with murder, come on, they're gonna keep on murdering. They kill us for a sport. This ain't something that just like, oh, you know, it was a circumstance where it just got out of hand. They kill us for a sport. You know why? Because they can get away with it. They're the only institution that can get away with murder and got everybody back in the state's attorney, the state's attorney's office, which is corrupt. You got the medical examiner's office, which is corrupt because they lie for the police on these medical exams to get them off, right? You got these judges, you got all these people that are evil and they know right from wrong, but they don't care. So until we really have that real conversation and charge these officers accordingly and just stop talking about money. And if you want to place money, let's place money into where these unsolved crimes. I'm sick of people in my community getting murdered. The movie you were talking about was The Purge. It's the purge on Black folks. All this community violence that's going on, it is out of control. I'm sick of every day lives are being stolen from young to elderly. It doesn't even have, like at one point it used to be like, you know, younger people, but it's like all age range, and it's mainly brown and Black folks, right? Let's be real. So if they want to put some money up or something, the same way they investigate a crime against a white person, they find the killers immediately. It ain't like I guarantee within a week or no later than a month, the case is solved and they got the killers prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. That's what they need to do when a Black and brown. That's why I said it's crazy, right? How they play us like police brutalities over here, street violence. It's all together. It's called the highway of hell. Until we realize that we're fighting the same fight, an evil system that's doing what it's designed to do, that's wipe us out, legalize genocide, no matter whatever way they want to try. If they want to give us, you know, give us poisonous foods to eat. You get what I'm saying? Unhealthy foods instead of teaching people how to grow food from. I can go on all night, but I won't for time's sake. But anyway, if anybody want to reach me, they can reach me at Miss Tawanda, MISTAWANDA, number 17 at yahoo.com. And we have an email address for West Swansea. Right now, we're currently doing like interviews online because of the COVID, but I've been connecting around the world. And this week I will have Breonna Taylor's cousin on West Swansea, this West Swansea. So if anybody want to connect or learn more, we have an email address that tells everybody where we're going to be at type of thing. And also, if they can support me, we'll be at, unfortunately, this Saturday marks the 7th year of my brother being executed. And we're going to be at the awful place where he died and took his last breath at 7 p.m. We're going to be on Kentmore and Cowsway. It's right off of Loch Raven. We're going to be there at 7 o'clock, just doing a candlelight for his commemoration. So, and I thank you for putting this together. This is well put. It was very intriguing. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tawanda. Tawanda, I put your email in the chat.
Thank you.
I just want to say again, thank you to our panel. Aja's computer died. She just messaged me. so we lost Aja, but she was amazing. So I just want to thank all of our panel members and all of you who came with your energy to share in this space as we had this conversation. If there are no other questions, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. BRJA, we do these events every month. We try to have them on the 13th. In COVID times, that doesn't always happen, but we try to have them on the 13th. We will be having a recording of this event on our website. So if you want to share it with someone, it will be available on BRJA's, I guess, our Facebook page and our webpage, Julia. Okay. Also in the comments, Anthony has shared the link where you can donate. We are a nonprofit, so we always appreciate donations. So if you would like to use the link to make a donation through PayPal, we would very much appreciate that. If anyone doesn't have anything else to share, Julia or Anthony, do you guys have anything?
I was just going to ask about next month.
Oh yeah, I was going to say that next month we're going to be doing an event on race and comic books and Black people and people of color in comic books. So it should be really, really exciting. So I hope you guys will join us for that.
Thank you, Julia. So if there's nothing else, we were going to go ahead and wrap up. I hope everyone enjoys their evening. Be safe, and we will see you all next month. Bye, everyone.